This video is mainly focused on the structure and function of the brain. Now, first of all, let us learn about a little bit of the gray matter and the white matter portion of the brain. A very common term we are quite familiar with, and we have heard a lot of time that we have the gray matter and the white matter, which are the two component or two part of the brain. It actually is a brain where we find two different forms of neurons that are present mostly, like the gray matter, which usually consists of the cell bodies or dendrites and the axon terminal of the neurons, of mostly non-myelinated form of neurons, means neurons without any myelin sheath on top of it. The white matter, on the other hand, will be comprised of mostly myelinated neurons completely, and it is majorly occupied with that of the axon region of the neuron. Now, this two different portion, it actually serves a little bit of different type of processes. Means the gray matter is responsibly for processing of the information, because it is comprised of the cell bodies, and the white matter, on the other hand, it is mostly for transmission or communication between different parts of the body and the gray matter of the brain. So the two part, it forms up two different type of activity. It has two different kinds of activity. Whereas 40% of the brain will be comprised of the gray matter, which is mostly the outermost part. The white matter, on the other hand, is the inner 60% of the brain. Now, here is another picture showing the same thing, like what it actually looks like, where you can see that the outer surface is darkly stained. It's called gray is just because the brain, which is quite like a pinkish hue type color. Now, that outer portion, it appears a bit of darker in color, and on preservation of a brain, on like formalin or any other kind of preservatives, later on the brain actually loses all the color, all that redness, and becomes a kind of towards a colorless grayish kind of color. And during that time, this outer portion appears to be quite prominent grayish like in pattern. So that's why this part is actually called the gray matter. So if the gray matter is actually the outer cortical region of the brain, and the inner portion is what we find is quite whitish in color. Mainly, as I said, it's actually comprised of the myelinated neurons. So means the myelinated axons mostly. So it is the inner portion. Now, talking about the structure, as quite familiar that the brain appears quite a kind of foldings or wavy like pattern. Now, in that waves and folds, we actually need to know the name of that structure. Is that the bulged out portion is what is called the gyrus part of the brain, and the foldings or the fissures or the gaps, like the inner gaps of the fold, whatever we see, that fold is what is known as the sulcus region of the brain. That is like the name of the structure, and we usually find that the blood vessels are running through that particular region. Now, talking about the part of the brain or the structure of the brain, briefly we can consider brain. It is formed of like this three parts: the cerebrum, the larger portion of the entire brain, which has the distinct shape of that foldings and like gaps or crevices in between or fissures in between. And then we have this the portion which is at the back side of the brain, at the back of our head, we can say, and that is sometimes called the small brain, also called the cerebellum, which is like a distinct small globular part at the bottom back portion of the brain. And then we have the brainstem, the inner rod-like structure with which we find that the spinal cord is entirely connected with, and it is this brainstem which is called also known as the medulla oblongata, is the one which communicates with that of the rest of the body. Now, the three region has three different kind of purposes. The cerebrum is the one which is called the area which mainly deals with the processing, all the different kind of processes, different activities, intelligence, the memory, vision, sensory input, motor output, everything that is there, everything is controlled by the cerebrum region. The cerebellum, it maintains our body's posture, it maintains the balance and the coordination of different part of the body. Brainstem, on the other hand, it actually deals with a bit of our autonomic nervous system, or actually should not say autonomic nervous system, but rather autonomic processes of the body, or the very basic things of the body, like breathing, like the maintaining the pressure of the blood, the process of the reflex action of the vomiting, swallowing, all those kind of things. A bit of it controls the process of digestion also. So all these things are somewhat these autonomic processes, even cardiac movement, the cardiac muscle movement and everything, all these things are somewhat is regulated by the brainstem region. So the three different part of the brain, it's controlling different kind of function of the entire body, and all together it completely controls and completely coordinate every single process one with the other. Now, the cerebrum, which is the largest portion, the part of the entire brain, we're going to deal with that particular. Our this video is completely focused on that particular part of the brain. So, moving on to the cerebrum can be distinguished or can be broken down into these four different parts, major, which is called the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe. Now, each and every of those lobe have its own different kind of purposes and function. Like the frontal, it is mainly, it deals with the cognitive activity, the emotions, the personality, behavior of a person, the intelligence to some extent, judgment, the capacity to judge over the situation, capacity to plan a problem, or if we face a problem, how to solve them, the total process of maintaining the speech, how one speaks, how one is going to like frame the words and everything, all of those things, awareness even, all of those things are something that is regulated by this frontal lobe completely. This part of the brain has been seen to process all those kind of information. And not only that, it has these two regions with it, called the, like here it is written as the motor strip and the sensory strip. In reality it is called the motor cortex and the somatosensory cortex. Now that two region are majorly dealing with the different type of sensory input that is coming from the body, means the input of touch, the input of pain, the input of like hot and cold, all those kind of things, they come to this particular area and they enter through that area where we come to like process all the information. And then the motor strip, it actually, or the motor cortex, is responsible for sending out the signal, how to move the leg, how to move the hand, how to do like change the position of the body, everything. Now all those things are like the activity of the frontal lobe. Moving on to the next one, which is the parietal lobe, which is right behind this sensory strip we can find, and it is majorly dealing with the process of uh, sensations, like somewhat it responsible for hearing, how we hear the things, how we like remember something, how we try to how we try and control the intersensory input of the air, of the brain, of the, or like of the different kind of sensory organs of our body, the nose, the smell, everything that we're getting. Somewhat it processing, the sensory processing is actually going on right there, because sensory strip somehow it comes under the parietal portion. So when we talk about that, like our perceptions, yes, and we have our perceptions also, like it is maintained by that particular area. So it is like the total senses, different kind of senses, all these activity are actually or regulated by this parietal lobe. Now we are going to find these two regions that are present, one in the frontal and one in the somewhat it is connected with the temporal and and the parietal portion. Is actually called the broca area of the frontal lobe, and the wernicke, the area of the other side. It actually deals with our processing of like the speech. So whenever we process a speech, it is the broca area which is responsible for framing the words, framing the sentences, like what we are going to like speak now, the movement of our tongue, the movement of our lips, all, and even the larynx, how they are going to move so that the word is processed out. The broca area is responsible for that. But the wernicke area, it somehow processes the entire sentence, that what we are speaking when we are hearing with our own ears, and we are processing that entire thing. That entire processing is going on in the wernicke area, and it has been noticed, if anybody is suffering from any damage to that particular area, that the person usually cannot frame the words properly. Even whatever the person is saying in front of him, means the person opposite to that one who's hearing that information, that speech information, that entire thing is completely wrong, completely misunderstanding of the entire thing is going on. Means the person cannot understand whatever the like he's hearing. He cannot process that sentences. Even his own speech becomes quite jumbled, and it is all because of this wernic area. So it is somehow responsible for framing of the sentences also. Next, we have the occipital lobe, which is majorly dealing with the process of our vision. Means whatever we're seeing, whatever light is coming to our eyes, entire interpretation of that visual input, the sensory input, everything, it's all processed by the occipital lobe. It is like at the back of the head. That's why sometimes person getting a little bit of injury at the back of the head immediately loses vision. So it is because the occipital lobe is somehow getting the trauma. Then we have this temporal lobe, the one which is marked with the green. It is majorly the one that is responsible for maintaining the like hearing, the total input of hearing and everything. It is all regulated there, and our memory, it is somehow with the help of the internal portion of the brain, which is the means of the for the forebrain only. We have the, we'll be discussing that later on, the limbic region. That limbic region along with this temporal lobe together, they have this capacity to remember things, to memorize things. So if we say that the frontal lobe, the tip of the frontal lobe is responsible for our intelligence, it is this particular area that is responsible for the memory. So it is whatever we are hearing, whatever we are learning, whatever we are seeing, everything is memorized there. It is scraped there and later on will be processed. And it's not marked here, but you can say the point where the arrow is pointing, that particular region is actually our olfactory bulb. It can be found. Means it is right there where the processing of whatever we smell, it is all done right there in the temporal lobe region. Means it is literally the place where the arrow tip is present. In that particular area there is this specific structure, a swollen portion that can be found inside, called the olfactory bulb, which is responsible for that process of the entire information of smell. Now let's move on to the structure of the, with the general structure of the cerebrum and what this different part is responsible with. So if we see the entire structure of the brain, if we like get a cross section done of the brain, we'll find that the brain can be separated into this cerebral cortex, as is the like the entire portion, the white matter, gray matter, the total area. Then we have this internal lobular structure, means from full different kind of lobes or bulb like structure that can be found inside, is which is called the basal ganglia or the basal ganglion, or sometimes even called the basal nuclei, is what is known as, it is majorly formed of this gray matter. Means the cellular means the neuron cell body is actually there and large. And then we have the brainstem region, and in that basal ganglia area only we are going to find that the limbic region is present. Let's see it with this particular perspective. So the image to the left, this one is what is showing the entire portion of the basal nuclei or the basal ganglion. So it's like the portion that we are seeing here, the one which is marked with this like purple like color, is what is known as the main basal ganglion area. And then we have this image to our right, which is showing the limbic region of the brain. So these two regions are also different part of the brain responsible with particular like according to the major structure. If you can see them in the major structure, we find that these two portions are also there, each responsible with a with their own function and processes. Like the cerebral cortex, if we say, is responsible for processing of all those information. As we can see, all the lobes are actually present in the basal cortex area, or the cerebral cortex, sorry, area. Then the basal ganglion on the other hand, it's actually responsible with the purpose of the like several secretions, and all these things are actually going on. And it is somehow controlling or regulating our motor activities. Means whatever processes of movement and everything is going on inside our body, somehow it is responsible for that. um, to be like very specific, actually our this entire portion of the basal ganglia is is actually intercommunicating with different parts of the brain. Means all the like somatic sensory cortex or the primary motor cortex or the frontal cortex, even the parietal lobe, all these different part of the brain, it is connected with this particular region, and it is helping in the entire process of movement, how we move our different part of the body, how we actually coordinate the movement of the different part of the body. Everything is being maintained there. And it has been seen that there is a specific neurochemical transmitter called the dopamine, which is found to be present in this particular region. The intercommunication is going with the help of this particular dopamine, which if any way becomes reduced in secretion, means its secretion somehow reduces for whatever may be the reason. If it happens so and it is going on for a long period of time, the person actually lose the activity of control over their motor movement, and this condition is what is known as the Parkinson's disease, a famous disease that probably one have heard about it. So this Parkinson's disease is all because of the like problem in the movement and all, regulation of the motor movement and all. So it is all because of loss of dopamine secretion in this particular region. Next, we have the limbic, as I have shown you the picture previously, how it is arranged there. So the limbic region, it is actually one of the like another structure that we will find inside, and it is somehow said that it is responsible with the process of our entire process of emotions, how we maintain our emotion, how we control our feelings, all this thing. It is something all distributed in this region. They are all analyzed and been found that whenever we think about something, we try to remember something. We try to memorize something, or even recollect something even from our old memory, stored memory. So it is all there. The amygdala somehow is responsible with our normal emotion. If anything is happening in that amygdala, the emotion level of the person completely changes. And it has been seen that the hippocampus area is where our major regulation over the memory is found. Means even it is like the area where it has been noticed that the short term memory gets converted into the long term memory, because the person who has got like damage in this particular region, the hippocampus, it actually the person cannot remember or cannot recollect old memories. They slowly forget whatever has happened to his life previously, and or even in recent days, whatever it has come, it actually starts forgetting these things. Even latest memory also, mostly latest memory also, it actually forget, because it's the area where the short term memory gets converted to the long term memory. And those person, they slowly feel themselves going back in time. Means will remember things which are old but cannot remember things that are new. And that condition is what is known as the Alzheimer's. Another famous disease of like like related to the brain, but one was like famous about it, because people, maybe you have seen people who are suffering from this particular disorder, and they forget things. They forget things that are new, but they remember whatever has happened to his life long ago. So it is a problem which can be found in this hippocampus region. So all of this portion together forms the like part of different parts of the cerebrum, and is responsible for all the regulation of different activities of the body, and coordination of different activities of the part of the brain body and all.